It is IDAGIO Live. It's Thursday evening, May 21. And if it's Thursday, it means it's a chat with Thomas, which is one of my favorite things to do during the week. We've been doing this now for, what, 4 or 5 weeks. And we started off, I think it's still a wonderful line, that IDAGIO Live, IDAGIO, the place where classical music happens. And one of the wonderful things about this live series is that we happen with a lot of our colleagues and friends and introduce you certainly to people that you only know the name, probably have never actually seen them, might have heard a recording of them, but now you can actually have a listen and get to know them better. And tonight, it is really a great pleasure to introduce you to someone who might not be so physically known, but I can tell you is taking our industry by storm. And I don't want to embarrass the young man, but I must say, I don't know if you've ever heard the metaphor for our industry is rocket ship. And this is a NASA rocket that's going to circle the moon several times before he's done. And tonight, welcome, Klaus Mäkelä. You are.
Oh, thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you, Thomas.
Now,
it's my pleasure joining.
Now, the problem is that we only have about 45 minutes, and if I start reading all of your various jobs and engagements and accolades, we're just not going to get anywhere. So I would, we'll put a link to his website at Harrison and Parrott. But Klaus is at the moment, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the chief conductor and artistic advisor designate of the Oslo Philharmonic. And designate is a little bit rich because you start now in August, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So let's just call you the artistic director and chief conductor. You're the artistic director of the Turku Music Festival in Finland, which is where we met. You are the principal guest conductor of the Swedish Radio Symphony Orchestra, and you are the artist in association. I like this. You have to explain that at the Tapiola Sinfonietta. So let's start with that one. Tapiola is something I thought you bought in the grocery store and is that a pudding? Where's
well,
Tapiola?
It could be. Well, Tapiola is actually somewhere really close to Helsinki, almost in the same city, in the neighboring city called Espoo.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful chamber orchestra, and for a conductor, of course, conducting all the big works with huge orchestras is always a lot of fun. But I think musically, conducting chamber orchestras is also something really fruitful and important to your heart. So that's why I've been focusing on Beethoven's all 9 symphonies with them. And we have sort of this project we started 2 years ago, and now we should be completing that in the autumn. But let's see whether we can really perform Missa Solemnis and the 9th Symphony with this.
You're in Helsinki now, right?
I am at home.
And you're having a wonderful sunny day at 14 degrees, I understand?
I mean, that's our highlight of the spring so far. I believe it's something quite different in your place in Zurich, right?
I'm in Zurich, actually, and I was 27 today. It was quite nice. A lot of garden work. The first time I went to Helsinki was in January.
Oh, really? When was that, by the way?
It just after you were born in 2011.
Thank you.
I think it was 2011, 2010, 2011. Okay. And it was like minus 23, and I wanted to go for a walk, and that was it was a wonderful public and a wonderful recital, and a beautiful city. My goodness. But you're also which city is the Swedish Radio Orchestra in?
It's in Stockholm, the capital of Sweden. Yeah.
So you're in Oslo, Stockholm, outside of Helsinki, and Turku. Where's home? Yeah.
Well, it's still in Helsinki, which is not really in between of all of this, but it's still a relatively convenient travel to and from.
Are you Helsinkian?
Well, sort of, yes. I lived for a relatively short time in Espoo, but for you, it's Helsinki now.
Were you born in Helsinki?
Yeah.
And went to school, but you went to school in Helsinki. Is the main music center school, right?
It is, and actually the Sibelius Academy, which is sort of the famous school for conductors, and I was really fortunate and lucky to be really studying there with the Professor Jorma Panula, who is relatively well known.
He's relatively well known in artistic circles and in conducting circles. This guy is a legend, and has brought some of the greatest conductors of the last 20 years to our lives. you know, and fantastic. So you grew up in Helsinki. You went to Sibelius Academy, and are you still in some way related to them? Do you teach there? Do you work there at all?
Well, actually, now I've been some time a little bit distant from there, but of course, I mean, being in Helsinki, the circles are rather small. So of course, you see all your fellow colleagues and friends just when you open your door.
Well, apropos your circle, if I may, and I have to read this because it's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to love this. This is Klaus Mäkelä. Forget about the virus and what got upset and so forth. Let's just look at the press release for his 2021 season. First appearances with Gewandhaus and Boston Symphony, the Gewandhaus Leipzig and Boston Symphony Orchestra, the Concertgebouworchester, the Deutsche Symphonieorchester in Berlin, the SWR Symphony Orchestra, and returns, of course, because he returned to Orchestre de Paris, Gothenburg Symphony, Frankfurt Radio Symphony Orchestra, Helsinki Philharmonic Orchestra. He also continues his tenures, of course, with Swedish, what we talked about, and he's finishing your Beethoven cycle with the Tapiola. You've got, you know, Mahler, Sibelius, Messiaen, Mozart, Ravel, Mendelssohn, Bruckner, Tchaikovsky. Oh my goodness me. I mean, this is, and we're going to talk about the contemporary composers a little bit later. Other, you know, next year or this year, you already did Cleveland and Frankfurt and the Swedish, Scottish Chamber, the city of Birmingham. I mean, goodness me, Klaus. I mean, you know, hello.
Thank you so much.
Rocket ship, you know, actually, you're not a rocket ship. You must have, do you have your own plane yet?
Well, thank you very much. You know, but I'm so fortunate to be, I mean, cooperating with all the great orchestras and great soloists like you. So, you know, it's only my pleasure.
We had a great time, I must say, and I had heard about you and I'd been warned about you, and of course it was wonderful for us to establish such an immediate musical friendship, and then of course we became friends despite our vast difference in ages. But you know, it endlessly fascinates me, because when would you say, as we say in America, the lid came off? When a couple of seasons ago? When did this kind of schedule start becoming your life? Or is it just now? Or do you feel, you know, oh my God, what's happened? Or is it feel like it's an organic development? Do you feeling good about it?
Thanks for asking. I actually sort of feel very comfortable with all of this pacing of the appearances wherever they are. I was fortunate to be signed to Harrison and Parrott many years ago, and by that time, because I had started quite young with Jorma Panula studying conducting, which
right.
he thought was something actually quite important, because when you are still growing up, you should already
you were especially young to have started with him, isn't that right?
Yeah, I was actually 12 at that time, which seems, of course, which seems totally ridiculous, really.
When I was 12, I couldn't even spell conductor. That's fantastic. Yeah, I had a golf club in my hand, and you had a baton in your hand. I like that. Sweet. That's very nice. Okay, so you're this 12. Were you called a child prodigy? I mean, you come from a musical family, right?
Yeah, I come from a musical family, and sort of the first memories of life are from music. You know, my parents playing together, and I sort of grew up listening to music quite a lot and playing the cello, which I still try to do. But sort of the musical awakening for me was actually through singing. I got to sing in the children's choir of the Finnish National Opera in Helsinki when I was 7 in the first grade of school.
I love it.
And the first opera was Bizet's Carmen, which is such a, I mean, we know the piece. At least you know it rather well.
Intoxicating, I can imagine.
And I mean the drama, and of course the music, the great music in that. I mean, for a 7-year-old or for a 70-year-old, it's the same kind of impact, I think.
I was a little bit older, but I was in the children's chorus of I Pagliacci.
Oh,
and Canio was the great Richard Tucker. Can you imagine? I mean, and I just couldn't believe. I was so. And he was just the nicest man you ever met. But I mean, what a voice! Anyway, so you were in the chorus, but you played cello. How did you get into this very famous class? Did you have to audition to get into the conducting class?
Yeah. Actually, then I started playing. Yeah, I mean, it's always a little bit different, but in that case, Panula had asked for sort of especially young conductors to come to the audition, and you couldn't really prepare at all. The teacher said that come at a certain date and a certain time, to a certain place, and then we just were quite many youngsters and young people, and then we just had to conduct Prima Vista. We had a small ensemble. We were also playing there when we were not in front of the others.
I love it. You played for you played for your competitors to conduct, and vice versa.
And everybody were equally scared. but then actually at the end, it was even quite difficult if I think of it now. I mean, the 39th Symphony of Mozart, the E flat major.
Yeah.
And that we had to do, and then it somehow went okay.
What do you think? Panila is his name, right?
Yeah, Panula. Yeah.
And what do you think he was looking for? What was he? Because I mean, choreography can be fixed, but intent of phrasing is perhaps a little bit more showing or something. What did you feel he was looking for?
Yeah, I think he was always, I mean, testing all of the auditioners. I mean, I think he was sort of looking for a certain combination of clearly some already musical substance, which at any age you could give at least something. And then I think he was also, because he was always also looking for this kind of physical way of I mean, just being with their hands, in a way, being with their hands comfortably. Yeah. And
did he ask you trick questions?
Well, not at that pace, but of course later quite a lot.
I mean, like the transposition of instruments, and that sort of thing. Is that sort of handwork, as we call it? You know, I mean,
and that's of course the basis of even getting to know a score. But at that time, I think his strategy was just to sort of somehow find some people who he thought could be, and then he took a couple of people from this group, and then he started to develop, and then some he then made disappear. Yeah, exactly. And then were there
any surprises? Were there any surprises of some colleagues that were with you and you thought, wow, that's what a talent, that he's gonna it didn't actually make it?
I mean, there were so many great I mean, there were a lot of great instrumentalists, which of course I was, and I'm still of course looking up to. But I mean, one of the great things in conducting class was always the fact that people were not the same age, but they were. For example, my friends then, I started when I was 12, but one of my very good friends was almost 30, and sort of the range, the variety was quite wide. So it was also, I mean, on the human level, really interesting. I mean, to get to know very different kind of people in very different stages in their lives, which of course is taught to you quite a lot.
How long were you with him? How long were you there?
I was for 6 years, which taught me really much. And then we also traveled quite a lot. So he was holding master classes around the world. We went to China together, and to Netherlands and Denmark and so on. And then also actually what Mikko Frank, a fellow colleague who is now the principal conductor of the Radio France Philharmonic, he said that, which I agree, is that the most actually you learn from Panula was not in the classes, but when you were sitting next to him on a bus or on a plane, was when he sort of opened his really, yeah.
Is he still with us?
Yeah, he's going strong. He's born 1930, and apparently he's still teaching a lot. I call him here now and then. I mean, a couple of times a year.
He enjoys that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I hope.
So,
yeah.
You are listed as cellist and conductor. If someone called you and said, we'd like to do the cello concerto of Dvorak, is that something you do, or are you only conducting?
Well, I used to do it, and I think I could still do it. It would need a couple of days to prepare.
What about isn't there a Korngold cello concerto as well?
Well, there is, which is actually really good, but there's nothing better than the violin concerto, right? It's even better.
Yes.
Or the Totestadt, which is quite nice.
Well, the Totestadt is terrific if you're it's how you look at it. The baritone has the best aria, but it has absolutely no role. but it's a wonderful, but it's gorgeous music. I'm a big Korngold fan.
Wasn't he 20 or something, 21 when he composed the Totestadt?
Oh yes, and it's massively over orchestrated. It's like he wanted to get every musical idea in every instrument he could think of. Yeah. It's just it's crazy. You really, you really have to weed it out, and it's a wonderful piece. But are there probably, I think if I understand you correctly, most of your cello playing now is more chamber music, or is that not?
Exactly, and that's something. I mean, I believe that the playing an instrument is really healthy for a conductor, because I mean, when you are just asking other people to do things, it might slightly distance you from the actual doing, and of course producing the sound, which I think is so important. And I always learn when I play the cello. I can try out things which I may be asking then if they turn out interesting or worth asking for. But also, I mean, I just enjoy the playing together with other people. I mean, being a cellist, you cannot really play much of solo stuff. I mean, as probably you have noticed, all cellists have been posting Bach suites, but that's sort of it. But we enjoy playing with other people, and the chamber music repertoire is the best.
I'm fortunate to be pretty good friends with Yo-Yo Ma, and so he's just an amazing musician, human being, and all of that. But I only know the repertoire because I buy all his records.
But I mean, he plays everything, and he can do everything so well.
You have to meet him one of these days. Enormous sense of humor. I mean, he's really quite funny. But did you ever play like the Don Quixote, the Strauss?
Actually, that I never played. Maybe I could still play it. And I sometimes used to do this kind of play direct, so without conductor, because as you know, usually the conductor is only distracting in between. So then sometimes it's quite nice to play and conduct, but of course the repertoire for cellist is rather limited compared to violinist or pianist.
I'll share something with you, and maybe we'll get some bad mail on this. I don't know. I think that if I had 5 conductors and I worked for 20 minutes or half an hour on something that I know about, I think I could probably get pretty close to tell you whether they're a string player or a piano player. It's a different approach to the texture. It's really quite interesting. That may be complete nonsense, but
no, actually,
it was fun to watch you with the orchestra in Turku, and of course you guys were doing Zarathustra, which is, my God. Let me ask you something. You have a score. Are you one of the? Are things memorized by the time you conduct them, or? And I'm going to ask you a question that I think normal people want to ask. They see conductors up there, and they see him they see him conducting, and they see him maybe or maybe not looking in the score, but the score is there, and then they'll turn the page and whatever else. Or somebody's really watching the score and conducting. I guess the question I think a lot of people would ask is, what are you looking at when you have the score there? Are you really reading the score, or are you scanning the whole texture? Is it reminding you of the ebb and flow or the pacing? What is it you're looking at in the score?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the relationship with the score is, of course, I mean, it's quite a long process. So maybe to start with the beginning, the first time you see a score which you never saw before, is something you read it like a menu in a restaurant. Just you see what there is. You read it from the top and then down. And then you turn the page and you read it through. Okay, then the second time you go through the score, you start, then you see if it's a sort of tonal piece, mostly.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Yeah. Because you're a cellist, you're a string player, when you look at a score for the first time, do you tend to go to the string section to see what the flow is? Or you're obviously a trained score reader, so you're really going from, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be winds, brass, percussion, and then all the strings. That's kind of the layout of an orchestra score. But I'm just curious, since you're a string player, do you kind of go down to the quintet and have a look?
Well, actually, good question. Depends on the music. Sometimes quite a lot of the important stuff is actually happening down there. And then woodwinds somehow decorating or ornamenting or coloring. But of course, the bigger the structure gets, of course, then the more, and also the later the music is written. I mean, closer to 20th century, 21st century, then of course the more happens also
Right.
up there. But
Right.
then you get more and more familiar with the score. Then you start to recognize that there's a melody, and then you always take the melody and the bass. And then you start figuring out, okay, what's in between? And then you do it a lot of times. And then maybe at that phase, when you have already quite a sort of clear picture what you want, then I start to do analysis. So I sort of cut it to very small pieces. So I just draw lines where I just make sure that, okay, this is the length of a phrase. And then when you have it sort of divided in pieces, somehow, I mean, it's always personal, but for me, then it's easy for me to put the pieces back together, and then I realize their importance and sort of how they are related and how they are not.
It's a similar process with vocal music, because we need.
All right, how do you do it?
We need to get the text away from and actually everything about the text. The structure, the language, where it came from, the thought. You try and imagine why the text inspired the conductor to set it. Or the composer. And a Schubert piece. So you're going to have all that stuff where it comes from, and then all of the Schubert stuff where that comes from. And why did Schubert want to make that poem in a musical marriage? And the minute the text touches music, the text and the language become musical elements, in my opinion. But they're inspired from the thought process, the human psychology that is born the text. So it's always this layering. But what I was really comparing was the idea of breaking it down and then putting it back together. This makes a lot of sense. So when you're standing there, when you're standing and you're conducting something as massive as the Zarathustra, have you done it often?
Well, actually, that was the first time, and now I'm doing it sometimes later. Yeah.
I remember a colleague of yours, a wonderful young conductor that I'm very, very good friends with, is Philip Jourdan. And he did, I was on a program where I was singing the Rückert songs, and the first half was, the second half, I don't remember, whatever, was the Dvorak New World. And it was just wonderfully textured and layered. And, he turned the pages once in a while, but he just seemed to be coming down. So I went back to him and I said, my goodness, isn't that wonderful? And it must just, feel good to really be living in a piece like that. He said, what are you talking about? It's the first time I ever conducted it. And so I started thinking, well, maybe the first time out, actually, by the time you get to that, you really are putting it back together and you're very comfortable with the piece. The Zarathustra just felt completely in your hands, but I didn't feel like you were, even though the score was there and there were certainly references to it, you weren't in the score, as it were, but you weren't necessarily my memory. So I think general public can feel that with a conductor. And I think it's a question that we get asked very often. What is that relationship? A colleague of yours once did, for like a summer program, he put on, I think, Google glasses or something like that, and they filmed his eyes while he was conducting. And they put on a big screen the score. And so the audience followed him conducting and cueing and seeing what he's scanning I find that fascinating.
That must look really ridiculous from the eyes of the audience, because of course in the performance, I usually tend to have the score in there. Sometimes certain pieces I just like to do without score, because then you feel a little bit more free in terms of not turning pages. But with certain composers and pieces, I also feel actually that having the score right there, even if I'm not really looking at it, it somehow makes me feel closer to the composer, somehow closer to the essence.
Hanencourt felt, not just in his, Hanencourt felt it was disrespectful not to have the score.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other side of the coin. Seiji Ozawa always had his score there, but he almost never opened. And he's famous for his photographic memory. So, do you have photographic memory?
Well, actually, no. But I just base quite a lot on seeing, but not that well. But I'm actually curious, what about for you? I mean, singers have to memorize so much music. I mean, being on stage and everything. Is there a certain process for you, to approach this kind of
Well, it's
task?
slow and long. It depends on the language. It depends on the intricacy of it. I think that, for recital work, there's a kind of photographic thing going on in that you do see the page, or I see the page. It's also curious for me. I have to work on a piece for quite some time, and at some point it's ready to be memorized. But I can't just go in and decide to memorize something. It doesn't. The gestation has to be there. But pretty much singers probably would tell you that they memorize the text as a text. Now, saying that, it is helpful to memorize the text in the rhythmic flow of the song or of the orchestra piece or the opera. So, but that's kind of happening because especially if it's a foreign language, especially if you're working with somebody who helps you with the language. If it's a completely foreign language to you, like Russian would be to me, and I'm working with a Russian coach, then I need to find the flow and the rhythmic structure. The diapason is going to take care of itself. I mean, if you're halfway musical, you'll stay inside of E flat major. That's not a big challenge. And reading music for singers, I think, is highly overrated. We should be able to, and you should have obviously the ability to read music, but reading music and learning music for a singer are completely two different things. And I always say it's a little bit like getting it from your left brain to your right brain by the time you perform it. But what about perfect pitch? Are you a perfect pitch person?
Well, actually, no.
Oh, I love it. Oh, you're almost normal. You're just unbelievably talented. That's all.
Well, thank you.
But I always feel a little bit, and I know other people ask this. I'm trying to ask questions that I'm trying to be, as we say in German, a Stellvertreter for public, because I think people want to ask conductors questions. When I hear somebody say they're perfect pitch, I want to say, what century? And then you actually have people who say, yeah, the Baroque pitch makes me crazy. Or they have other people say they're actually modern pitch or tempered pitches or an orchestra that's not tuned, or, all those sorts of things. A little bit of it is perhaps, well, I don't know. I don't have, in fact, I say I have relative pitch. It's relative to anything going on around me. If I'm singing something very complicated and a lawnmower fires up, I'm in trouble. You really have to concentrate. But when do you play through your scores with your cello?
Well, not too much. Sometimes, very, very rarely, I just try on some bowings, really. I mean, just to make sure whether it works or not. But actually, it's just quite quickly. I mean, it's all routine. I mean, just to, get to the mood of just, reading music. Yeah.
So and I know people want to know this. So somebody's going to say, oh, so you're telling me, Mr. Mäkelä, when you sit down and open a score and it's got all these instruments and all this you look at it and if somebody says, all right, here's A, then, and you know what key it's in, you're looking at and you're hearing that music you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, of course, people think that when I open any score, then it, music just starts playing as from IDAGIO or some other service. Of course, it's not like that, but it's through what of course, you see certain lines, but in order to, maybe the challenge of being a conductor is the fact that you have to have always 5 or 6 sort of different kind of textures or structures in your head at the same time.
This is the biggest problem for soloists of a solo instrument, then going into the orchestra. This multi-dimensional hearing and balancing that you guys have, that you train and work at, and obviously what you're extremely talented for. This is a remarkable talent, ladies and gentlemen, that we're talking about. This ability to hear at the same time the conversation of harmony, melody, rhythmic motion, as well as balance, as well as in tune. I mean, this is is it intoxicating?
That's something which you just, get used to. Somehow, of course, you don't think it when you just, it's always when you start rehearsing. Before, when you wake up in the morning and before our first rehearsal, then you might think that, okay, today we're rehearsing this or that and what might happen, but then you just don't think about it too much. Then you just, of course, you have prepared, and then because you have prepared, you feel comfortable and actually interested in now, seeing and hearing how it sounds. But then when the exact moment when you start working with an orchestra, whatever it is, wherever, then you somehow focus on that, and then you just start operating the machine and correcting and balancing and unifying certain things.
Is there a
and
certain element of, is there a certain element of simply facilitating them to do what they do? I mean, you're not up there telling them how to be musical.
No, of course not. And it's always a dialogue. I mean, my job is not to bring, or my job is not to make them play as I hear it, but it's to play, you know, it's a dialogue. So of course they learn from me and I learn from them. You know, from every orchestra you hear something, oh, actually this is how they play. And then you might want to make it slightly different, or you want to have exactly like they do it. And then it's, you know, it's always like this. And of course the most interesting thing is that it's usually non-verbal communication, which is the greatest, because then if you would explain everything with words, it would destroy everything. So I mean, just the greatest thing is to communicate with an orchestra with just even, you know, raising an eyebrow or looking at a certain direction, which then makes an effect. I mean, that's the greatest moments for a conductor. I
remember Michael Thomas told me this wonderful story about him playing the piano for Piatigorsky, the cellist, right? And
great master.
Exactly. Can you imagine? And Piatigorsky had apropos eyebrow. You know, he would bring the bow to the thing, and he was, no, Michael, when I give cue, start, okay? And he would go, you know, and Michael's sitting going like this, and he said, Michael, you did not start. You did not start. I gave cue, but you did not start. We try again. And of course, Michael does it. It's just absolutely hilarious. So anyway, it's rather, yes, the cue. Now, going from, this is also interesting. I mean, you are, you know, you're on a wave of repeating engagements, but you're also on a wave of more and more, I guess, debuts. I mean, you know, you're young and you're getting started. A lot of orchestra going, oh, we want to have him here. I want to see if that's like. Two questions. Like you said, you learn from an orchestra. Have you had the experience that you've done a certain piece with one orchestra and you felt somehow like because of that same piece going to another orchestra that it informed you, enlightened you, or is every orchestra kind of its own texture of dynamic? And I mean, you come out, they introduce you, you've never made a piece of music at all with them, and boom, there you are. I mean, what's all that process like? I
mean, it's always exciting. You never know how it will be. I always try to.
You get to always choose the repertoire?
Mostly, yes. I would say 90% of the cases, yes. And then, of course, usually it's a little bit of a dialogue. So they give me something, I can maybe then take some piece which they want to include in the program or something. But mostly, yes. I mean, it's always something which I try to somehow minimize the risk and maximize the impact in a way with the repertoire,
right?
Because there are orchestras which are more traditional and orchestras which are more from playing wise more diverse. And of course, with any composer, you want to have a very certain way of playing, certain sound, and you have relatively short period of time to make that happen. So then I always try to somehow think that, okay, this work would be especially good here, but maybe I'll save it for a later time here and here. So this is the first step. But then, of course, getting in front of them, it's always just communication. And with some orchestras, I mean, with most of the orchestras, to be honest, I mean, I have never had this kind of bad experiences yet. I mean, a musician's life is long, I hope. But I mean, it's usually something, I mean, just a couple of minutes, and then I mean, it's a two-way thing. You have to get their trust, and then they have to get your trust. And it's not only that, you know, orchestras are testing conductors. I'm testing them as well, but I'm just not saying it out loud. So,
let me ask you another sort of from the 10th row. Because you mentioned physicality and nonverbal communication, do you have in your, regardless of orchestra, do you have in your mind, in your body, different physicality, whether it would be Mozart or Beethoven or Sibelius or Mahler or Grieg or Wagner, or, I mean, do they all have, is that what we're talking about?
I think that's a very interesting question. It always also depends, because conducting is mostly reacting to things happening. So in a way, you cannot, there's no way you can prepare your moves. I mean, that would be totally nonsense. So in a way, then you just, some orchestras need to have, even in Mozart, a little bit more weight, and then you have to use more weight. And then some orchestras play too much, and you just have to somehow. So it's always reacting, which of course also makes it
because
interesting. But I think,
the idea of weight in an orchestra would, of course, be as dependent upon the orchestra itself as the music you're playing, right? Because I mean,
exactly.
If you give a cue for weight of sound to Leipzig, it's probably going to be different than, and I'm not trying to be at all, you know, I mean, they're just a great orchestra, and also do you, I mean, it's probably like driving a fantastic car. I mean, sometimes you're driving a Rolls Royce, and sometimes you're not. And the reaction time physically of orchestra, do you have to sometimes stop and say, no, I really mean here, not here?
I mean, that's what some people do, and to be honest, I'm not doing it a lot. But for certain pieces, for certain concertos, for example, if you're conducting a Stravinsky violin concerto or a brand new piece, then you sort of would expect things to happen around where you beat. But then mostly, I mean, I always enjoy different orchestra cultures, and it's always a conversation. So it's not that I'm purely listening and just accepting everything, but actually I'm really sort of precise and detailed. But the fact is just that if you hear an orchestra which has a tradition which gives you this sort of, if we think about a very traditional, for example, let's say Germanic way of playing, the basses come a little bit ahead, which is the basis of the sound, and then slowly building up. And for example, all of that, you don't feel like changing. Okay, play on my beat. Destroy it.
Right.
So
is
it's
it
always
with Scandinavian orchestras?
Sorry?
Is it different with Scandinavian orchestras?
They're all very different. So, for example, I would say from the Scandinavian orchestras, the Oslo Philharmonic is in a way a fine combination of actually having the sort of American orchestra type of precision and detail, but on the other hand, having this very rich, full-bodied string sound, which I love absolutely. And even though I don't have a driver's license, I still believe it's a Rolls Royce.
You don't have a driver's license?
No.
Well, you are old enough, just barely.
Thank you.
I can help you. Next time we're supposed to be in Turku together, or maybe Oslo, whatever. I'll take you driving.
Maybe you teach me then. Thanks.
That's very funny. Do you know, by the way, there's an old joke. I try and tell it in English, about the principal of the Berlin Philharmonic and the principal of the Vienna Philharmonic talking about Furtwängler. And their, colleague, may I ask you this question? Dr. Furtwängler can be quite exaggerated in his, when is it that you actually play the downbeat in his gesture? And of course the Berliner says, it's very simple actually. In fact, because I'm there, I'm watching. The minute Dr. Furtwängler's hand passes his belt line in his suit, that is the downbeat I play. Everybody plays me. It's not a problem. And he says, now what about you? And the Viennese guy said, well, we pretty much start before it gets embarrassing. Auf Deutsch is it, wenn es blöd wird, dann fangen wir an. No? Anyway, I can imagine. I mean, Michael used to always say that the conductor's really on there to give the downbeat, and they could probably go back and have a coffee. Just get it started. Here's now. Everybody go. It must be a fascinating world. But I mean, you have such a list of various orchestras, and you have your. I mean, am I allowed to tell how old you are?
Well, that's all right. I'm not embarrassed by that.
How old are you exactly? Precisely.
Well, I think I'm 24. Yeah.
I think you're 24 as well.
Yeah. I always try to think, but you don't think of your age, or do you? I mean, it's something.
No, you don't think of your age. But the right reason I'm going after your age is because if you look at all of these, and what I talk about it, and people are going, my goodness, all these orchestras, and he's a rocket ship, and he's got all of this. It is remarkable how much repertoire you have.
Thank you very much.
And this belies a particular passion, which I have experienced firsthand, and I know that it's there and it's very exciting. But I think people would be interested to know what your study program is like. How far in advance are you studying things, or someday you're going to do this, so it's on your study. I imagine you're looking at music all the time, no?
Yeah. I mean, a studying process is something which you cannot really measure because it's taking, as we know, musicians study until the end of their lives, and of course you never feel you have understood something. But the thing is that maybe starting from playing the cello taught you the thing to enjoy the amount of repertoire of a conductor. You know, playing a cello, you have a couple of concertos and of course a great repertoire of chamber music. But then, I mean, being a conductor, you have almost unlimited access to all of the great music. And I try to just simply use that. So I conduct, even I'm planning quite a lot of Baroque. I'm doing Monteverdi, Rameau, Lully, and all of that. And then, of course, quite a lot of contemporary as well, commissioning and all of that, which I also think is very important and also fascinating always, because the world premiere is something very special for an audience, for an orchestra, and for a conductor. But then, of course, a study process is something I have sort of figured out in my head quite clearly what I want to do in certain stages of and with which orchestras as well. And of course, having my own orchestra in Oslo, I have also for them a very clear plan what I want to do with them, not for me, but also for them, because as a chief conductor, you are responsible for the orchestra and the artistic development of that. So you cannot really think of yourself. And then, of course, there are always, I mean, the thing is, there are always pieces which interest you. And for example, for next season, I have sort of, even if I'm doing still quite a lot of different stuff, I have chosen two composers which I very much immerse myself in. So it's Sibelius, which I conduct all the symphonies.
What a surprise!
Actually, quite a few. So obvious, Scandinavian conductor.
And the poster you gave me, and you and Lisa gave me, it's framed on my wall. We don't have time to tell the embarrassing story about it, but nevertheless, Sibelius watches over my music library, right next to Mahler. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
And then actually the second composer is Mahler, Gustav Mahler, which we share a passion. And actually with the Mahler, I had a very specific plan. So with that, I already decided a long time ago that that's a composer whose symphonies and works I should really approach in chronological order. And of course, starting with the songs. And then I did them for a couple of times before. Now I'm doing the first two symphonies and then the season after 3, 4, 5, and then so on. So sort of continuing very much like this. And actually, for example, working with you in Turku with these Wunderhorn songs, which we did at the end quite many, because then the other singer canceled, and then you sang with what the day's notice.
Oh, I'm a proverbial jukebox when it comes to Mahler.
But you know, it was, I mean, such an inspirational period for me. I mean, to also get to work with you, who is so deep in that world and in that music, and of course also from the experience you have. I mean, when was the first time you heard of Gustav Mahler's music?
Oh, that's now become, I've told the story so often, it's famous. I was way back a long time ago, just after electricity was found. I was in school, and I was also kind of teaching part-time, which is very audacious to say, but I was teaching voice a little bit part-time at a community college. And I was getting ready for the summer program at the Music Academy of the West, is where Lotte Lehmann, the great famous German soprano, retired and eventually died. And she had brought out Marcel Sanger, an equally famous French baritone, and he was the teacher. And I was going back for, I don't remember the first or second summer. I don't remember that I was there, but I was, and you got pieces assigned to you, and I was assigned a Mahler song because he was going to have 5 of us do the Kindertotenlieder. And I realized I didn't really know that much about Mahler, other than these amazing public broadcasting concerts of Seiji Ozawa that was from the Boston Symphony, were just, you know, amazing and wonderful. So I thought to myself, well, let me chronologically figure this guy out and just get to know his musical language. And you know, so I got in my car to drive to teach lessons, and I put in a cassette tape from the public library. Probably of Rune Walter or maybe Bernstein, I'm not sure, the Mahler 1. And I get on the freeway and I'm driving along. I realize after about 15 minutes, I'm driving 30 miles an hour on the freeway, and I'm having a little hard time staying in the lane, and I'm listening to these primal sounds and this, and when it finally just dumps into that fantastic A major chord, wow, it's like, oh my God. And I realized I was a danger to humanity. So I pulled off into a rest stop and just listened to the symphony the rest of the time. And I was, of course, horribly late. And I thought they were going to be very angry. And I walked into a group of musicians and I said, I really apologize. And I told them the story. And it was a trombone teacher, and he just looked at me and said, I'm surprised you came in at all. And when I heard Mahler, I was gone for a week. And have you heard the third? Have you heard the fifth? Wow, wait until you hear you. And it was just this wonderful avalanche of association because of the power of Gustav Mahler's music. And I can't say that I understood it, but I knew there was something going on that I really wanted to understand. And fast forward now, and that's terrific. But that first intoxicating, well, I'd never heard symphonic music like that. I just hadn't heard it. It was just kind of took my breath away. And it still does. And it's still one of my favorites. You don't just go from 1 to 9 and you get rid of the first 4 because you've discovered the last 3. It just doesn't work like that. No. And I'm sure you find the same experience. Do you get frustrated with your schedule now that you have enough time to study?
Well,
let me ask you this.
Do
you have as much time to just study things you want to study, or are you now in a total preparatory kind of rhythm?
I actually feel very comfortable with all of the pieces I'm conducting, because it's anyway music which mostly I've been studying for a long time already. Studying any piece, any symphony. It's not a 1 or 2 weeks or 1 or 2 months even, but it's something you need to digest, as we know. And it's something usually, for example, the case with the Mahler 1. I have had the score, of course, probably already, 15 years at least, or more, because actually that was the first Mahler piece I got to know.
Wait a minute. You're 24. You started with the maestro at 12. You were reading Mahler 1 at 10?
Yeah, well, I started sort of reading scores when I was 7, but of course the 7-year-old doesn't understand a thing of the scores. But the fact that my father, who's a cellist, he had this huge amount of these small pocket scores, and
right.
Then always, I was borrowing one. The first, I think, was Dvorak 9, and then getting to more complicated ones. And then the Mahler 1 was the first Mahler, and then another one which he had, which he loved, was the Das Lied von der Erde. Which, of course, from the other end, which is, of course, for a child also quite interesting. But anyway, but for example, with the Mahler 1, when I then a couple of years ago decided I'm conducting it in Oslo in my first concert as a chief conductor, I bought another score, and then also the other versions of it to compare and so on. And then I just started studying it at least a couple of years ahead. And then I always came back to it, and then leaving it for a while, aside, and then again, getting back to it. And for example, now during the pandemic, I've been spending much more time with it again. And then I feel already now that I could conduct it, but of course I still have some time to prepare myself even more. And this is, I think, a rhythm which is important. You cannot give yourself 1 week time to learn an Alpine symphony. You could learn it and it's no problem, but it's not the sort of essence of.
Apropos this crisis we've been in, and I'm not sure we have time to really talk about the possibilities of how it's going to all reopen and so forth. But has this been I once the kind of depression and shock of being unemployed and confined and quarantined and whatever else it was in March, and also being overwhelmed by the tragic consequences of not only my colleagues, but just the world. Just being overwhelmed with that. At some point, I just found my own center of gravity saying, okay, this is my unexpected sabbatical. Let's make the most of this. Let's keep, stay positive, Tom, which I kind of have to hit myself over the head and do sometimes. And that sounds a bit like, not that you had to stay positive, but this sabbatical is kind of how you've seen this period. You have also been completely away from performing. Is that true?
Yeah. So my last concerts were in March in Paris, and I believe those were the last concerts there before then all the regulations came. And of course, then coming back to Finland, which at that stage was something a little bit, I mean, we're a little bit behind the whole world in the rates of infection and so on. But then quite soon, all of the strict regulations came, and I actually also was for a short while a little bit sick. But
not with the virus.
Actually, might have been. I went to the antibody test,
some people had that.
And that showed some antibodies for that. But I had it anyway as a very mild version, which I'm of course very, very fortunately and grateful for that. But I mean, I think with all of the people, it has gone a little bit like in phases. And when I came home from Paris, I thought, well, now I have great time to study all of the pieces, which I'm anyway looking forward to studying later. And then I started just, I studied a lot of Turangalila Symphony Mission. And then I did this Sibelius immersion, all of the 7 symphonies. I was sort of really trying to get into the head of Sibelius and walking in Helsinki, in the empty streets of Helsinki, and I mean in the place where Sibelius used to walk about 100 years ago. And then with Mahler the same. But of course, then there were some moments when so many things were cancelled. Then you are reading a thing which you should be doing somewhere, and then you start thinking, oh, am I actually going to conduct this, and when? And then of course that you are maybe not 100% productive, but I don't think that's the thing which you should be aiming for anyway. But I mean, I've been studying and getting inspiration, reading and like that.
Okay.
How have you been?
We are getting close. There are a couple of points I want to get before we have to leave. And the idea behind these Thursday sessions and me inviting my colleagues and friends and I thought after all of the singers, I should actually up my game and talk to somebody half my age or more, who's far more spectacularly talented and actually works inside of music. In other words, a musician. So it's really been fun. But I do have as we always do, ladies and gentlemen, you look down, we have a playlist, and Klaus has put together a marvelous playlist, and there are 2 probably unusual names at the end of it. I mean, the Grieg we know about, and as also a service I like to do, I'm going to do a screen share, and we're going to look at the IDAGIO website together. So here I will go into screen sharing, turn my computer on, and optimize the whatever else, and I'm going to share. Now on your screen, you probably have us in little bitty pictures. And this is Klaus, and we're going to go over here to, no, we're not going to go there. We're going to go here. Oh, dear me. I looked at the wrong thing. Here we go. This I hope you can see. I may have to go back and do this again. Hang on. I think I messed up. Here we go. Screen share. I need to find this page, and then I do it. There we are. Now you see just the IDAGIO, correct? And you will see that one of the things I love to show you, if you go to Discover, this is the splash page, and we are actually online here. There's a wonderful app. But if you find something you like, whatever it might be, you can save it as a playlist. And I'm going to go straight to the playlist. I'm sorry to do this so quickly, but we're going to run out of time because there's another broadcast after me. And this was my visit with Klaus Mäkelä. And these are some of the selections he has that he was saying. I asked him for things he loves to listen to, things that he's inspired to listen to, and also things that he thinks perhaps people don't know that should be listened to. And I want to ask you a question about the Oslo Philharmonic eventually, but I wanted to draw attention to these 2 composers. This is also something I like to do with IDAGIO. We have over 15,000 classical composers. And I didn't even know that there were 15,000 plus classical composers. And I love to drop the needle on a name I've never heard of before. And you caught me completely and totally with Bjarnason. And the piece that you suggested we didn't have on IDAGIO, we soon will have. But this Stillshot is part of a string quartet. And I would love people just to hear the beautiful soundscape for just about 30 seconds. That is so cruel and so awful to do that, but you get this wonderful sound. And then we, how do you say this? It's a woman, no?
Yeah, Anna Thorvaldsdottir.
Yeah, exactly. Say it again, please, slowly.
Anna Thorvaldsdottir.
Right, and she's written.
I mean, I'm not Icelandic, but I try.
Okay, Icelandic. So, and let's have a listen to this, and then we'll talk. Is that an A or G? It's an A. I'm going to cruelly just jump forward. Okay, we can stop there without, oh my goodness, I need to go back and listen to this whole piece. Now, we're going to run out of time. In fact, they're going to start yelling at me very quickly here. Let's see if let me just ask a question. Am I good to go? Boom. One, I wanted, first of all, did you know Marius Janssens?
Not personally, unfortunately.
It looks like we can go on. We can keep on chatting. This is like inviting a friend over for a glass of wine and said, "Oh, hell, stay, I'll make dinner." So it looks like we can go on. Oh, we are the last one. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have to go, go. But Klaus and I, it was like this in Turku. By the way, Turku Festival is just a wonderful festival. I so love being. I played golf up there. We made new friends up there. I was so disappointed that we had to cancel that this summer because of the virus, and we were going to do some more work together, but we will certainly return. And you know, I just wish you all the best with this festival, and Lisa, the wonderful director. And I mean, it's just, it's good stuff. So you never met Marius?
No, unfortunately. I mean, that's one of the really things
I'm sorry. He would have loved you, and you would have loved him. He was a great human being. But we talked the other day, and you're so passionate about the Oslo Philharmonic, which, by the way, I didn't know anything about them until EMI was doing recordings with Marius. And actually, that might have been when I first heard of Marius Janssens. I've never sang with him. I never was with him, but I knew him in his time. But we were talking about the Oslo sound, and you were talking about Marius's hand and soul still there. Is that how you feel about it? And that's not to take anything away from the other music directors that have been there, especially Vasily Petrenko, who's also a very good friend and a wonderful conductor. But there is something that is still Marius in Oslo.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, a tradition in an orchestra is always something interesting, because I mean, every musician is replaced by one at a time. So in a way, always when the new musician comes, he or she is adapting, bringing something new, but also adapting to the sound and the way how they play. And especially with Oslo Philharmonic, I believe that nowadays it's quite a rarity to find an orchestra which plays with a rare kind of sound, which is an individual sound, and a unique kind of sonority. And I believe the Oslo Philharmonic still has it. Many reasons, I believe. Marius's hard work and really building the orchestra. Also, choice of repertoire. A lot of Russian pieces, a lot of Mahler as well, and all of these kind of composers which give you the possibility to really work on different kind of balance, different kind of combination of different sounds, and all of this. Then when you do it for a long enough time, it sticks to the great player's head.
You know, you mentioned a very, I mean, Marius qualified without question for the title workaholic.
That's for sure.
I mean, absolutely non-stop not, and always passionate, always human, patient unless somebody was wasting his time, or seemed to be ambivalent about making music. He could get quite agitated when he felt somebody was being ambivalent in what they were doing. And he felt so passionate about the privilege to be a musician, especially a musician who is allowed to make their living, regardless of being a soloist or any other, just simply being a musician, the privilege and responsibility at the same time. And he was relentless about that in the most, when I was there once and I won't say where it was or what the orchestra was, but he literally, it surprised me. We stopped and he looked at a couple of people and they looked away and then he said, he said, would you like a different job? Do you want to drive taxi? Do you want to go work in a hotel? Do you understand what you're doing here? Or what, how can you be like this? How can you play like this? It's not, and he said it in such a way that it was not chastising. It was like he was wounded. And everybody just went, and the next sounds that came out, I mean, it was a little bit, it reminded me very much of that famous outtake of the rehearsal of Lenny with the Viola Philharmonic, working on Mahler 5, where he says, this is Mahler, this isn't music, this is Mahler, don't you care? And he could get quite agitated and perhaps more personal, but he was a remarkable man, and I just love the fact. And I must tell, I mean, everybody, you've worked with the Oslos often, or at least, right? So you are appointed chief conductor and music director?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, actually, my title is chief conductor, but yeah.
All right, chief conductor, and you're starting your tenure this August. And it kind of hit the news. I mean, Norman and Brecht went crazy, and even before that moment, your contract has been elongated.
Yeah.
So, I mean, other than at 24 having this tremendous wave of job security, if we ever get to publicly perform again, does that sort of thing feel special to you?
Yeah, I think. I mean, having the contract now for 7 years, of course, makes us able to really plan things in long periods. Because, I mean, working with an orchestra for a couple of years, you can make some difference. But if you really want to work and be one, it takes time. And, of course, now starting in mind, having the 7 years sort of ahead of us at least, makes, of course, the whole commitment, I think, just feel on a different kind of level. So I'm, of course, very happy about that.
Do you think some of it was also them saying, we want to give you time to just gestate with us? I mean, you're a young man, you've got a lot of repertoire, you're everything, but let's make sure we have enough time with one another to let all of that mature? It seems to me, I mean, I think people are impressed because of the business side of it, but it impresses me of a tremendous amount of trust and will to, as you say, find this heartbeat together.
Thank you. I mean, I think the most important thing between an orchestra and a conductor is just the word trust. And of course, I feel this gesture from them as a sign of trust. And of course, I also show that to them. So I mean, it feels like the great way to start now and start working on all of the possible pieces. And I just hope that we could make music as soon as possible again together.
We're talking Helsinki, Turku, Oslo, Stockholm. What language is your rehearsal in?
Well, actually, in English. I should speak better Swedish, because I mean, Swedish is still the second official language in Finland, although spoken only 5% minority, but still it's a second official. And I could do with that in Oslo as well, if I would be brave enough, but I'm still slightly shy with the Swedish language,
Is it a complicated language?
Well, not really. And especially, I mean, growing up, still learning it in school, it's relatively close to German, actually.
I mean, you know Barbara Bonney, the wonderful soprano. She got married to Håkan Håkagård and just learned Swedish. What? And sang Swedish songs. I mean, so there's marvelous songs in Swedish and orchestrated songs. I'm completely intimidated, and there's so many wonderful Swedish singers I would never presume upon the repertoire. But I don't. I mean, all of the northern languages just seem a bridge too far to me. Do you speak Russian?
Not really. I studied for a little bit in school, but I don't really speak it now.
Latvia?
No, but actually the Swedish language is something which unites sort of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark quite a lot, and for some very strange reason, the Finnish language is totally apart. I mean, doesn't have almost anything together with them. But on the other hand, it's separate. It's totally separated. And then on the other hand, we are somehow very strongly linked to the Hungarian language.
I was about to say, I've always isn't that strange?
It is, and there are a couple of reasons which might have affected that, but it's still, I somehow feel always very comfortable in conducting Kodai or Bartók, because it's always the sort of the emphasis always on the first syllable, for example, of the word.
If you were to work in Budapest, would you understand people?
I wouldn't understand what they say, but it would sound to me as something very familiar. But there are only a couple of words which are really the same, but it would sound something quite comfortable,
Okay, since we had the luxury to go into that, yes, no problem, you were the last one. Okay, so now please let's go back. Well, no, we don't have to go back. It's curious that you wanted to play the piece from Daniel Bjarnason, and in fact we did play a little bit of the string quartet, and then he is conducting the Iceland Symphony Orchestra for Anna
Thorvaldsdóttir. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And of course, the music very much sounds like a metacosmos for orchestra. I really look forward to letting that, to listening to this piece. I don't know either one of these people as composers. I had never heard of either one of them. I absolutely love it, and I'm sure that a great of our public are going, wow, drop a needle. And so please tell us a little bit about these people.
I mean, there are so many interesting composers now around the world, but I believe that one of the sort of some of the most important, I mean, at least my favorites are from Iceland at the moment. So Daniel Bjarnason and then Anna Thorvaldsdóttir both are now sort of new generation of Icelandic composers. I also very much like and conduct quite a lot of works by Sauli Zinoviev, a Finnish composer, and Jimmy Lopez, a US-based, originally Peruvian composer. But now choosing these two Icelandic composers is quite interesting. Anna has made these large orchestra pieces like this Metacosmos, which in a way describes falling into a black hole, and then sort of, which I think from soundscape reminds us quite a lot from the time we've been spending in quarantine. I mean, going through the different kind of emotions, from the very deep melancholy then to the bright, transparent light, primal light in a way, or at least. And then Daniel Bjarnason, who is this sort of Renaissance musician, I think, conducting Anna's piece, and he's sort of performing also, but he's a wonderful, spectacular composer. And I've been conducting quite a lot his violin concerto, which is written for Pekka Kuustam. Both great musicians, but there are so many new composers who I would like to present. What
generation are they? Are they your generation?
They are slightly older, but not much.
Wow. And are you friends?
Yeah. Well, I sort of know Daniel more than Anna, but yeah.
And you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation that you're actually commissioning works. Do you commission works a lot, as in your various functions with various orchestras?
Yes, and of course now being able to commission for the Oslo Philharmonic is of course a bigger responsibility, because then I'm also looking at Norwegian composers, who there are a lot interesting ones, but then of course also international ones, who are sorry, it's just phone ringing, but yeah, also international composers who are very interesting at the moment.
And you have on your playlist wonderful Grieg, which we all will love to listen to, and also Klaus put not only the piece but the performers he would like you to listen to. So do have a look at the playlist; it's great fun. And the Sibelius piece, which is quite wonderful.
Yeah, I mean the Sibelius piece. I mean, I chose that actually because of the pure drama, the power of that piece. I mean, it's Sibelius's first masterwork called Kullervo.
Okay.
It's a dramatic symphony for a big orchestra, for baritone and a soprano, and in the male chorus. And it tells this, there it is.
In Finnish? In Finnish?
In Finnish. And it's based on the national epic Kalevala, and a specific story which is actually relatively tragic. It's based on sisters who then fall in love, and then which they don't know, and then they kill each other, and then it's not a happy ending. So it's a very tragic story. It's very Finnish in a way, but it's a very powerful
you're
piece.
now reminding me that we had so many songs to sing of the Mahler, and we were thinking, okay, what would we save and do as an encore? And we both like so much doing the Tambourcell together in the orchestra and so forth, and it was sort of left over in the dramaturgy. And you said, well, we can do it as a second encore if they really want it. And I said, you can't encore the Tambourcell, which we in fact did, ladies and gentlemen, and only in Finland.
Exactly.
And everybody thought it was absolutely marvelous. Most people, when they hear the piece, they go, oh my God, So yes, there's this wonderful Finnish dark human side. I don't want to make fun of it at all, but you're right. There is this, it's just, and when I say the word dark, I want to use this as an adjective in a kind of positive, complex way,
I mean, it's something in our nation. I mean, for example, all of our folk songs are in minor, and they sound very sad. I mean, I think that tells quite a lot. But
you'll love the fact Stephen Foster, over 200 songs, not one song starts in the minor key.
Well, that's something
variations on some, and you have all these folk songs in the minor key.
All of them are in minor. But I mean, the special thing with Kullervo, I mean, the Sibelius piece is the thing that I mean, he was a very young man composing that, and growing up in Finland at that time was something very different from now. I mean, his musical education was something really poor. I mean, he didn't go to music school. I mean, and he heard a full orchestra, which at that time sounded totally horrible, when he was 20, when he came to Helsinki. And I mean, then a couple of years studying here and there, but still in a couple of years, one composes a piece like this, which is in a way, in its still somehow feeling incomplete orchestration and relatively strange orchestration, so rare, unique, and powerful. And it's a powerful statement. And actually, from a sort of tonal point of view, it's very modern. So you hear things which Debussy writes 10 years later in his orchestral work. So it's in a way, and I'm just thinking that where would have Sibelius went if he had continued on that sort of direction? Then he started to sort of a little bit smooth out the.
I think you've made us very, very curious to explore your list, and especially the Sibelius piece. Klaus, even though we're allowed to go on, I think we've been. It's 8:15. You need to have dinner. You're a young man. You need to eat regularly. I'm an old man. I don't eat at night. But I do. I think
you deserve some.
Anyway,
that's good.
I'm so glad that we could do this. I'm glad to catch you. I'm glad to have this conversation. I'm sure that everyone has enjoyed the various connections and descriptions of who you are and how you're preparing and all the music making you're doing. It's very exciting. It's wonderful to know you at this beginning part of your career and as a young man. And it's a big pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and great
to
see you.
I hope to see you soon. And hire the elderly.
Definitely, and hope to sing and play together with you. I mean, maybe in August still is possible.
Well, we can cross our fingers and hope that August happens. But
exactly.
Anyway, stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Be well.
All the best.
And great.
You too.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Look at the playlist. Have a great time. IDAGIO Live, the place where classical music happens. And tonight, it happened with a wonderful colleague, Klaus Mäkelä. Watch his name. Look for his concerts. It's special.